Buenas tardes, bienvenidos a las sesiones de la RAI en la red. La RAI en la red es una serie de seminarios de una duración máxima de... ¿Empezamos? ¿Ya? Buenas tardes, bienvenidos a la sesión de la RAI en la red. La RAI en la red es una serie de seminarios que se transmiten a través del canal YouTube de la Real Academia de Ingeniería. Y en estos seminarios, profesionales de alto nivel de grandes empresas, organizaciones e instituciones comparten su visión sobre temas de alto impacto social en los que la ingeniería juega un papel fundamental. Hasta ahora hemos tenido varios participantes y así el 30 de septiembre de 2020, don Ricardo Hausmann, académico correspondiente de la RAI, profesor de Harvard y ex vicepresidente del Gobierno de Venezuela, nos dio una conferencia sobre la economía política mundial ante el COVID-19, rebrote o colapso. El 17 de diciembre de 2020, don Manuel Heitor, académico correspondiente de la RAI y ministro de Ciencia, Tecnología y Educación Superior de Portugal, nos deleitó con la conferencia de la colaboración de la península ibérica para la recuperación de Europa 2021-2026. El 6 de mayo de 2021, don Josuyon Imaz, consejero delegado de Repsol, nos dio la conferencia Una transición energética competitiva y justa, basada en nuestras capacidades industriales y tecnológicas. El 14 de septiembre del 21, don Michael López Alegría, astronauta de la NASA y académico correspondiente de esta casa y vicepresidente de Desarrollo de la empresa Acción, impartió la conferencia sobre el pasado, presente y futuro de los vuelos espaciales. El 11 de enero de 2022, tuvimos a don José Bogas Gálvez, consejero delegado de Endesa, que impartió la conferencia La transición energética ante la década de la electrificación. Y hoy tenemos el honor y el placer de contar con el Dr.Kandeh Yumkella, que será presentado por nuestro académico Ignacio Pérez Arriaga.
Gracias, presidente. Buenas tardes a todos los que se han conectado a esta conferencia de la Real Academia de Ingeniería de España, que será impartida por el Dr. Kandeh Yumkella sobre the urgency of the global energy transition in a post-COVID-19 world order. Ya que la conferencia será en inglés, I'm going to continue in English. Everyone that has been invited to this conference has had the opportunity of reading the brilliant professional trajectory of Dr. Yumkella. Therefore, I shall not repeat here the entire bio. Dr. Yumkella from Sierra Leone is a development economist, ex-director general of the United Nations Industrial Development Organization, UNIDO, Under-Secretary General of the UN, and founder and CEO of the organization Sustainable Energy for All, former Minister of Industry and Trade, member of the Parliament now in Sierra Leone, and always a champion of the cause of those without access to affordable, reliable, and sustainable energy for lighting, cooking, heating, and mobility. So why to invite these distinguished development economists to the Academy of Engineering? Well, engineers can do and do many things. For instance, 10 years ago, this Academy published this study entitled Tecnologías para el Desarrollo Humano de las Comunidades Rurales Aisladas, that is, Technologies for the Human Development of Isolated Rural Communities, where we described what engineers of different specialties, energy, water and sanitation, information and communication technologies that could support health and education, agriculture and forests, landscape, habitation, logistics of emergencies. This is what engineers can do and are doing to promote human development under difficult circumstances. Therefore, engineers, economists, sociologists, medicine doctors, teachers, even politicians can contribute to this common goal of development from many different angles. Perhaps none better equipped for this task than engineers. I carry the pin of the Academy of Engineering, but also this other pin, which is a pin of engineers with a purpose, ingeniería con propósito. And I think this is what we are going to be hearing about today. I first met Dr. Yumkella in Abu Dhabi. We were in the same working group in a preparatory meeting for the Davos conference. And the second time, that was at MIT, at the MIT Energy Conference. Every year, the MIT students, only students, organize a huge conference on current topics in the energy sector. Several years ago, they invited Dr. Yumkella to give the keynote speech for the day. When he finished talking, the audience of more than 700 people stood up and applauded for several minutes. I hope that you will enjoy Dr. Yumkella's talk today as much as we did in that occasion. Over to you, Kandeh.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Ignacio. Thank you very much to the Academy for giving me this privilege to share some ideas with you, but also to learn from you. I am not an engineer. In fact, my career did not start in energy. I chose to get involved in energy systems, and thanks to many friends, including technology companies, engineers, and others, they say, well, since you're interested in this subject, we'll begin to introduce you to the technologies and systems. And so we've had this wonderful symbiotic relationship where I bring to them what they do not know, which is politics, the views of developing countries, and the message that given the global challenges we face, whether it's climate change, pandemics, or in this case, illegal migration in Spain, we are in this together, and we have to look at solutions that requires technology, but technology cannot work if we, the politicians, the policymakers, do not create the environment where your technologies can spread prosperity and solve problems. So today, I chose this topic. It's a topic that I have been advocating on for the past 4 months. So what I'm doing with you, I have done with other institutions globally, but also with academics. Very recently, Imperial College, also their Energy Futures Lab, invited me. And I chose the same topic, but of course, with different nuances. And today, I'm talking to my Spanish friends. And so I'll give some twists that are relevant to you. The urgency of global energy transitions, I put it in plural because the countries are different, regions are different. Some are more advanced than others. And so indeed, we have different transitions. There's no one size fits all. And you'll hear me talk about Africa quite a bit. Why? Because we're neighbors. We're next to each other. Carbon moves from you to us and from us to you, but also the problems are linked. If we don't fix the problems down south in Africa, you will not also be addressed. And we need you engineers to help us with technology, but you engineers need us, politicians, businessmen, policymakers, to create the space where your innovations can help us solve problems. Very recently, back in September, the United Nations decided to organize a conference which was the first of its kind in 40 years, focused on energy transitions. And they had 5 working groups to prepare documents. Each of those working groups had 20, 30 institutions coming up with concise explanations, context for the policymakers to discuss, energy ministers, heads of states, and others who participated in the conference. So this was very recent. It was also all in preparation for Glasgow, as you can imagine. One group looking at energy access around the world or energy security. Another looking at energy transitions. What do they mean? What are the definitions? What do different countries or entities, stakeholders mean by energy transition? It may mean different things for different people, or the prioritization of the technologies and issues will be different within countries across regions and between countries. Number 3, how do we enable the Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs, through inclusive and just transition? It is obvious that I will have more interest in 3, so I spent more time there in that working group. Another one that is relevant to it was about innovation, technology, and data. We know that issues related to energy or the climate cannot be solved with only the technologies we have today. We need new technologies going forward. I'll talk a little bit about that later, but of course, waiting to hear from you, the engineers, what are some of the innovative technologies you're coming up with. Data matters. Yeah, we need numbers. We need to know more. We need to know how fast we're going. So our solutions have to be data-driven. So this group was looking at that. And finally, money. We can have great ideas, but you need cash to move them forward. You need cash to run the academies, but also you need finance to deploy the technologies at the scale we want for transformation in systems. So these 5 groups, and what I did in preparation was to extract some ideas of what they meant by energy transition. One school of thought has been very much interested in decarbonization. And that is typical of European economies, particularly European Union. For some, the whole issue about energy transition is decarbonizing, getting greenhouse gases out of energy systems. Yeah, in fact, getting rid of fossil fuel and moving rapidly into renewables. There's some groups in Germany now trying to organize what they call Global 100, a group of countries or stakeholders that will advocate for driving to 100% renewables. I'm sure you have some of those groups in Spain as well. But again, it is clear that whatever we do in decarbonizing the system, we want to make sure there is economic growth and social priorities are met, jobs, social protection, and so on. So there's this group of countries and people who say for them, the issue is decarbonization and climate change. That's the real issue. But there's another school of thought, which has a lot of developing countries, transition economies, but also advanced countries who are saying, okay, we want to decarbonize energy systems, but we also want to achieve Sustainable Development Goal number 7. And I'll talk about what that means. Yeah, and they say we want to achieve Sustainable Development Goals, the Agenda 2030, that we adopted back in 2015. We want to achieve those goals, and I'll talk about those later. At the same time, we want to meet the Paris agreements, all the commitments made. So it is not just about decarbonization. It is also about meeting the global situation where every 5 years we have a fire brigade approach to development. Why do I say fire brigade? A crisis comes, we forget everything we agreed on and focus. For example, we cannot say climate change is the only issue today. No, there are issues related to global security. There are issues related to poverty. There are issues related to the probably 1 billion people, 3 billion people who have no access to clean cooking. There are issues related to pandemics as well. So yes, we want to deal with decarbonization and climate change, but by gosh, we also want to solve these other problems that were there, that climate change may make worse. And that school of thought includes a lot of developing countries who are saying, for example, in Africa, in the world, 700 million people who have zero access to electricity, which you and I in Spain, in Austria, in the United States or Japan will take for granted. They don't even have electricity yet. They don't have the means to finance transitions. They don't have the means to, even if they're committed to climate change, they don't have the resources to meet the global commitments we make. Also, it is obvious that the circumstances are different. In my country, we're very poor. We're amongst the poorest 10 in the world. Our circumstances are different. So our national commitments will be different. We cannot make the same commitment like Spain can make. These are obvious things, but that school of thought is huge because it also includes some emerging markets. So there are these two big categories. There may be some in the middle, But somewhere in negotiations, whether at COP, the Conference of Parties, or in other forums, WTO in trade, these groups exist. And so there's a tension here that we have to deal with. And that's why meeting regularly, whether in COP or other forums, or the United Nations, the community of nations, matter, because we have only one planet and we all deserve an equal share of the opportunities there. So we move to this slide. If we're looking at decarbonization, the challenges are clear. Before we went to Glasgow, it was clear there was a code red. Based on all the commitments we had seen, it was clear the world was going towards more than a 2-degree rise in temperature. And it was clear if you wanted to stay below 2 degrees and in fact try to achieve 1.5 degrees temperature rise, we must reduce emissions by 50% already from 2010 levels by 2050. It is clear that a lot of those emissions are from energy systems, the majority. But what is also clear, that the G20 countries, the richest of the rich, account for 75% of these emissions. So there's this whole issue of energy justice, climate justice, and energy justice. Those who are polluting more must carry the responsibility, but the problems are larger for us. For example, us in Africa, we are already experiencing climate change. It's affecting our agriculture. We have the floods. We cannot even deal with those. We have more diseases. We are already experiencing climate change. The extreme weather events are very serious in a number of developing countries already, and they do not have the means. So the urgency for decarbonization is clear. We have to do more. Next slide, please. The next slide shows you some things you know already. So I just run through them. The left hand is showing you where the emissions are coming from. And the bottom one is clear. 41% of the decarbonization we need to do, the action has to be in power systems, how we produce energy. Transport matters, how we use it in transport, how we use it in buildings, how we use it in industry. And of course, agriculture and other sectors contribute a lot. It was very clear on the right-hand side that coal is one of the big culprits. Coal is a big culprit. And of course, when we were heading for Glasgow, people were saying that the government should ban the use of coal for good reason, because they saw those numbers. Next slide, please. It is also obvious that some countries are polluting more than others, China, USA, India, and the plans they have to do more coal-fired plants and so on, yes, indeed, is a serious issue for all. The right-hand graphs simply show some of the efforts being done over time. In the rich countries, in the first graph there, you can see indeed the yellow line is declining over time. There's been a reduction in the use of coal, and thanks to many of you in the European Union, you've been trying to fulfill those commitments. The use of gas is still steady. You depend a lot on gas. Nuclear, almost steady. And of course, there's a lot of push for renewables. But the right-hand side matters. The real action going forward has to be in emerging economies and developing countries for good reason, They care about climate, but they want prosperity as well, because your country and others have had a good 100 years or more of using certain technologies, becoming industrialized. And indeed, remember, you, myself, and others in the West, we were preaching liberal economics, democracy, and we had promised the world. I was part of that advocacy in the UN for 20 years, saying if you democratize, if you liberalize, one of the benefits you have is our lifestyle. Who is the lifestyle of the rich, the industrialized countries. You live our life. And unfortunately, or fortunately, that lifestyle includes a nice home, 1 or 2 vehicles, refrigeration, air conditioning, supermarkets that are full with food products. We promised people that over 30, 40 years, that if you democratize, you liberalize, especially the neoliberal school of economics, you liberalize your economies, prosperity will come. And prosperity was defined in a very narrow way. That's why they say, fine, we use the technologies you used, and so we can progress. So you can see one of the positive things is that renewables have been increasing significantly in developing countries. They've been driving that as well. And you can see that blue line in the graph growing. A lot of emerging economies and many of us in the developing countries have embraced renewable technology, and thanks to you, the engineers. And I know Spain, Iberedo, and other companies have also contributed to this. In fact, you demonstrated to the rest of the world in Spain that yes, you can integrate renewables very well, solar and other systems, into grid connections. So thank you for that. Spain contributed. The next slide says this is all good, and I'll just talk about the slide on the right-hand side. This is where we were in 2018, but this is where we want to be in 2050. We are doing well, but we're not doing well enough. To decarbonize, we need to do more with solar, with wind. We need to do more with renewable technology. We want to drive that share, which is very low now, maybe to 70%. Some people are saying 100% renewables. And of course, we're looking at you, the rich countries, to say, look, you have the institutions, the research centers, the academies, the engineers, and the finance to, in fact, go into renewables faster than the rest of us. But are you there yet? Are you really at 30%, 40%, 70%? Others are saying, well, it is the poor countries that should leapfrog. And we're saying, fine, the technology prices are dropping, but my gosh, we don't have the means. The financing is not there. The governance structures are not there. The institutions are not there. So who should move first? We hope we all move together, but we have to do more. I talked about that earlier. Next slide, please. So going to Glasgow, I started looking at commitments that were made because I was in some of these preparatory meetings, in other forums, other platforms. Ignacio and I are on a commission to end energy poverty. We were debating there. I am on the board of Rocky Mountain Institute. I thank them for some of these graphs that I've shown. I asked their permission because they deal with scenarios going 2040, 2050, 2060. I'm on their board, so I'm privy with some of the analyses that are being done for different countries and cities within countries. So we were asking ourselves, how fast are we going? International Energy Agency, Climate Transparency Report, all of them saying, look, we're not doing enough. In fact, we're having some of the hottest temperatures in 2020 and 2021 than we've ever seen before. Yeah, UNEP annual emissions gap analysis. They said, except for a few countries, most countries are not on track to be net zero by 2050. And most of those countries, even the rich ones, are not on track. A number of the European countries are making significant effort, but many others are not. So next slide. I just say that going into Glasgow, some of us were very pessimistic. Yeah. In fact, if you look at the bottom there, one of the reports that came out October 13th from the International Energy Agency, you know, I connected by Zoom for the launch of that. Laura Kozzi is a very good friend of mine. She's chief modeler for them. She says, we're going to Glasgow, not with the glass half full, but 80% empty, which means all the commitments that were made going into Glasgow would just have addressed 20% of the emissions we need between now and 2030. So we are all not being honest. We're not going as fast as we should go. Maybe we, the politicians, are scared because energy policy is sensitive anywhere, whether in Spain, United Kingdom, United States, Japan, or Africa, it is sensitive anywhere. It becomes political. Do you raise tariffs? Do you put in feed-in tariffs? What do you do in the transition to labor that is already embedded in fossil technologies? So it is always sensitive. Therefore, the movement, the scale and speed we need is not moving fast enough. Next slide. So, and the other thing that surprised us going into Glasgow was that, in fact, the very rich countries, we looked at some of those numbers, you know, you look at the bottom there, coal use in the G20 was going to increase by 5%. Gas use was going to increase by 12%. But you have people in Europe driving a campaign that European financial institutions should not support gas exploration and gas in developing countries. Well, wait a minute, is that not hypocrisy? If you're going to increase how much gas you use in Europe, in America, and in Asia, how can you tell other poor countries that, hey, our institutions will not finance gas anymore? And of course, we've been fighting over that. I just came back to invest in gas. We all need gas. Gas, in fact, will help bring in the renewables because you can integrate those systems easier and have base load. Next slide, please. The other issue was, there was this big slogan in 2020, Build Back Better. And the stimulus packages came in. And I was in many forums myself, legislative forums for the World Bank, IMF, for IRENA, you name it. I mean, I did 30, 40 Zoom calls from 2020 to now. Everybody's saying, build back better. We have an opportunity now with COVID to rebuild, to reorganize, and do things differently. So we checked. Of almost the 14 trillion stimulus package, only 1.8 trillion really went into recovery initiatives that will be transformative. But even amongst those, only about 300 billion was really directed at green recovery. Some of them were just green labeling. But what was interesting, in fact, was that in the G20 countries, almost 298 billion went back into subsidies for the fossil fuel sector. Okay, about 300 billion in green recovery, and almost similar amount going into subsidizing existing fossil technologies. So are we doing what we say, or we're saying one thing, doing something different, or preaching to poor countries to say, you move first, and they don't have the means? So we checked again. That's why it's urgent. We need to do better. We need to do more. We need to increase investments in renewables much more than we're saying now, and we need to do it fast within the decade. Next slide. So I come back. I talked a lot now about decarbonization. I talked about COP, our expectations of what would have happened there. Of course, we saw the commitments there now for methane. We saw commitments for RED, dealing with forests. We saw some commitments for the blue economy. And of course, some of the key players we needed there did not show up. Commitments have been announced, but again, it begs the question, will we fulfill those commitments? Can the developing countries trust you, the rich countries, to say, you will do what you said? So that was one school of thought. That's where the decarbonization debate has been. I come to the second school of thought, sustainable development goals. We mobilized the world to say, look, by 2015, we needed a charter, a new compact between all of us as a community of nations to see how we deal with old problems, existing problems, and the future we want to have. And so we came up with this framework. I was part of this. I was in Rio +20 in Brazil. And I spent as a chief executive in the UN, and at that time, I was also chairman of UN Energy. I spent a lot of time on this. I had a direct role. I was with Ban Ki-moon. I was responsible for Sustainable Development Goal number 7 and 9, because I was the energy czar, leading the UN Energy with the World Bank and other institutions there. Yeah, and I was Director General of UNIDO, dealing with industrialization. I pushed for SDG 9. But the point here is, we still have hungry people around the world. We still have poor people around the world. And those numbers will grow over time. Health services are not working, and we saw the fragility of those health services during the pandemic. We have unfinished business. But yes, SDG 9, we introduced, we had to fight for that. I spent almost a decade campaigning for a Sustainable Development Goal number 7, and I'll talk about that, and also Sustainable Development Goal number 9. Next slide, please. Goal number 7, we were clear. We wanted to ensure access to affordable, reliable, sustainable, modern energy for all. All of those were deliberate choices of words, and that's where you, the engineers, come in. There are technologies, but are they affordable for the rest of the world to acquire? Are they reliable? Because in some of our countries, Ignacio knows that, whether in India, Bangladesh, or my country, Sierra Leone, power supply is not reliable. It may come on for 3 hours in the day, and the rest of the day you don't have it. It may come on at a time you don't need it. Maybe you need it more at night, it comes during the day. Or the factories need it during the day, but they have load shedding. They don't have it in their location because they have to supply the parliament where the politicians are. Is it sustainable? Is it green enough? Modern energy. Why do we say modern? Because some people say, well, don't give me cheap solar. household system just for lighting. I want the lighting that will power my refrigerator. I don't necessarily need an air conditioner, but I want a refrigerator to store my food and the other products I want to take to market. So these were deliberate choices of words. Next slide, please. And we put clear targets. We wanted to ensure universal access to energy for all, that by 2030, no country in the world, you will have people that did not have access to electricity. We wanted to double the share of renewables in the global energy mix. Very clear target. At that time, we said, oh, it was about 15, 17% back in 2015, 2013, 2015. We say, okay, we double the share. We also wanted to double the annual rate of improvement of energy efficiency, which is very important for you in the OECD countries. Can you use energy better? Can you stop wasting energy? Can your appliances and insulation system be more efficient? And so on and so forth. So not only the goal 7 we established, we also put 3 clear targets. And this is why, in talking about energy transitions, we say, look, you must achieve a Sustainable Development Goal number 7 and its targets, in addition to meeting the Paris declarations. That's why the school of thought is pushing, that we cannot all agree on this in 2015, and suddenly you say, okay, forget universal access for the poor who did not have energy, and we only deal with decarbonization. It can't work that way. You need power systems to make the supply of water regular. You need power systems to run hospitals well. You need power systems to make sure the vaccines are stored properly in the cold chain so you can deliver it in the smallest village anywhere in the world. So we can't forget about Sustainable Development Goal number 7 and say we only deal with climate change. It is not possible. So the rest of the world is saying, look, we decarbonize, but we have to fight poverty. We also have to provide health services. We have to fight hunger, and indeed, access to electricity matters. So that is the context. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. Number 9. It is important, especially for you in Spain, why this is important. We need to build infrastructure. Countries also want to industrialize. We know that adding value and manufacturing and services is where the wealth creation is today. Our countries in Africa, for example, down south, we are poor and we're stuck in commodity trade. But remember, and I'll be coming to Africa soon, and I deliberately wanted to talk to Africa, to my Spanish friends. So goal number 9 is as important as goal number 7. You can't achieve industrialization without a reliable, affordable energy supply. It won't work. You need those. In fact, that's how you started creating the European Union. Part of the discussion of the 4 or 5 countries that started the European Union was about coal. Coal was the energy source. It was one of those commodities that brought those nations together that has expanded now and looking at everything else. Next slide, please. So with that context, I've talked about the urgency, why we need to do more. We need you engineers there. I've talked also about the second school of thought, that yes, climate change, decarbonization, but also growth and opportunity. And I use Africa as your case study because you are our immediate neighbors. Next to you in Africa, you have 900 million people that rely on firewood and charcoal for their cooking services. The picture on the left is from my village, a pregnant woman carrying firewood on her head to go and cook. The other picture there is from an Asian country, showing you that in Bangladesh and 700 million other people in India, for example, cook like this on a daily basis, a good number in Indonesia, but a lot of them in Sub-Saharan Africa. But also in Sub-Saharan Africa, we have 600 million people without electricity. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. We have in Africa a significant number of countries where people have zero access to electricity. In my country, Sierra Leone, the best studies you look at say our electrification rates in the cities is between 15 to 20%. If they want to be generous with us, they say, okay, 25%. In the rural areas, 1%. Yet, yes, we have energy resources. On the left, the fossil deposits. Yes, we have oil and gas. In fact, 30 to 40% of the new oil and gas discoveries in the last 15 years were in Africa. New discoveries of oil and gas. Mozambique, Tanzania, now Senegal next to you. Every company is heading there, looking for an opportunity to drill. Yeah, my country, they've discovered some too. Guinea, Liberia, Angola, still more discoveries. Of course, Nigeria, you know. But at the same time, on the right-hand side, we have some of the richest opportunities for renewables. Yet, the investments in renewable energy, Africa only has 2% of the global share of investments going into renewable energy. This is not acceptable. If we really want Africa to move faster on transition, what do we need to do is the key question. Next slide, please. Why should you care? You, the engineers in Spain. Well, you have to care. First of all, if we're looking at energy projections for Africa, from a 90 gigawatt installation, when International Energy Agency published this report in 2019, I was an advisor to them. They said, look, around 2017, 18, 19, 90 gigawatts installation, we need to go to about 380 gigawatts by 2040. And why so? Next slide. What is driving this need for more energy in Africa and transition, and why you should care? Demographics. 1 out of every 2 new people that they deliver, babies they deliver, is an African between now and 2040. Our population next to you will be 2.5 billion by 2050. 2.5 billion. And of course, many of you are saying, wait a minute. They are now at 1.3 billion, and we have all these illegal immigrants going through Morocco to head to Spain, others going through Lampedusa to head to Italy. Whoa, what happens when they're 2.5 billion? Economic growth, our economies will quadruple in that time. Urbanization. We have some of the fastest urbanization rates the world has ever seen. 3%, 4%, 5%. People just moving into the cities. Some of them are climate refugees. Agriculture is not paying off. They come to the cities. Of course, the cities, they're there preparing to head for Spain. The demand for transport is going to double over time in Africa. Therefore, for you in Spain, you the engineers, as you listen to me, what am I saying? Next door to you, we're going to add another 1 billion people to our population between now and 2050. That's tomorrow. They need economic opportunity. They need to industrialize. They need to modernize. And you need energy systems to drive that. Otherwise, if they do not have the opportunities, they head north, and you are our nearest neighbor. So we're in this together. And I know Spain has been working with us. When I was at the UN, Spain worked with us to establish renewable energy centers in Africa. We did the first one in Cape Verde, thanks to support from Spain, Italy, Austria, and some other countries. Spain had launched some programs to deal with job creation. It is better we come and visit you as paying tourists and we come back rather than we come to you to stay. And our children don't want to come to you just to stay. We want to visit you like you visit us. So I'm talking here about enlightened self-interest, that we're in this together. It is not about charity. I'm not asking for charity from Spain. I'm asking for innovation, finance. We do business together, energy business, industrialization, production of food. If you take food, FA, the Food and Agriculture Organization says, look, by the time the world gets to 9 billion, we need to increase food production by 75%. Where 60% of the arable land we need for that is in Africa still. We will feed the world, but we can also be the industrial hub for you. And you can make money down because we become rich markets with purchasing power, and we don't have to head to your place, but we come there to visit you as partners. This is why the summit we had last week between Europe and Africa was important. How do we create a new partnership where we're dealing with climate change? We're going to deal with pandemics as well, but we do it together. Shared prosperity in a new Green Deal where we deal with our own energy needs and your own needs to transition. So next slide. Let me go quickly then I've given you an idea of the drivers of energy transition in Africa and the urgency there, that we cannot go with pilot projects. Africa is beyond pilot projects. We want real commercial projects. We want utility scale renewable energy in flexible grids, and you've done well with that in your own country. How can we partner in a business environment? In fact, in Brussels last week, the Egyptians, I chaired some panels for the Commissioner for Energy of the European Union and the Commissioner of Energy for the African Union. I was moderating the high-level segment. And the Egyptians are already moving into green hydrogen. And Vice President Timmermans was the keynote speaker for us. He said, Africa can be the hub for green hydrogen for Europe, but they can also use some. But this slide I put up should give you, as engineers, a reason to think. We in Africa, we're sitting on some of the most critical minerals you need for the global energy transition. The International Energy Agency did a study last May. It's an instructive one. That study begins to look at key minerals you need to drive the global energy transition. Yeah, lithium, nickel, cobalt, manganese, graphite for the batteries, copper, silicon, and others for solar PV, copper and aluminum for some of the grids, because they're talking now about interconnection. We launched in Glasgow the Green Grids Initiative, launched by India and Europe, thinking about this new grid systems that will make us trade energy, the new energy internet, some people call it. Well, we in Africa were sitting on significant quantities of those. Cobalt, vast majority in the world is in Africa. Congo, for example, has almost 40% of it. Platinum, South Africa and its neighbors have 70% of the platinum group of metals that you need in your engineering work, I believe, for new hydrogen fuel cells. Uranium, we still have significant amount, but of course we have a significant amount of copper and manganese and other rare earth metals that you need for the smart grids. The message here I have for you, and go and look at that IEA, the International Energy Agency study. They're worried because the supplies of some of these minerals are concentrated in a handful of countries globally, just a handful. Some countries have 60% or more of those minerals. They're also looking at the projected needs if we're going to meet the net zero targets. We need to increase electric vehicles, maybe 6-fold, and we need more minerals for that. Yeah, offshore wind, we need some minerals that maybe we need to increase 13 times. So and battery systems, lithium, maybe a 75% increase in demand. How are we going to source this? But the bigger question for you engineers is new materials. We're going to need new material science to come out. We need to use these existing minerals more efficiently. Maybe we need to do better recycling and reuse. Circular economy ideas coming here. And you engineers are key in looking at these supply chains, how we have more resource efficiency. There was a time I served on one of the joint panels for the European Union and global community on resource efficiency for Europe. So you come in looking at resource efficiency, new technologies that optimize the use of these precious minerals. But the key message I give you, we Africans don't just want to be the source of raw materials. Yes, that's what happened in the days of the conquistadors. I think that's what you call them, back in 16th, 17th century. Now we're in the 21st century. We want to be partners with you. We want to make those solar panels for you. We want to make those batteries for you because, hey, we have the raw materials. It's win-win. You invest with us. You make money, we make money, but we bring solutions to the world for the Africans, for Europe, and for the rest of the world. So the global energy transition can move. We cannot be in Africa just a source of raw materials. If that scenario continues, then you will have problems because Europe is close to us. If we do not industrialize, if we do not create jobs for our children, they come up north. Yes, no barriers can stop them. Human race, they move. Worse still, if the worst impacts of climate change hit us, we have no choice, we have to move. And every projection says, in the worst scenarios of climate change, Africa will be hit worst. A 1-degree temperature rise globally in the Sahel means 1.5-degree temperature rise. More disease, more droughts, more floods, we head north. And yes, in this partnership that I'm describing, you engineers, politicians in Spain, we need to do this together. That's why you see last week, the summit for Africa and Europe to talk about a new Green Deal, a new way of spreading prosperity for Europeans and Africa in a new approach, where we deal with these problems together. By saying the pandemic has disrupted a lot of this, we Africans saw already, according to the International Energy Agency, almost a 30% drop in investments in energy, in the energy sector because of the pandemic. We've seen supply chains affected. We've seen tariffs go up on some of our power supply systems. Professor Ignacio knows that most of our utilities are bankrupt now. This has to change. So in conclusion, I gave you a broad sweep of why we need to move faster on dealing with decarbonization, why we need to revisit power systems, energy distribution systems, interconnections. I gave you an idea of why, in fact, previous commitments about fighting poverty, hunger around the world must happen. I've given you an idea of why we Africans need to industrialize. Yeah, why we need a new partnership with Europe that says it is shared prosperity. It is win-win. It is not one size fits all. So the concluding slides will just come up. You'll see the key conclusions I've given there for you to think about. The last slide, please. The last two slides. Key conclusions here. We need to radically increase investments in clean energy technologies. Some people say by a factor of 4. We need to electrify end uses, more electric vehicles, yeah? And these are percentages I picked out of the international energy agencies by how much we need to do it, yeah? From 6% to 60%. We need to decarbonize even in industrial production systems. We need to do better on energy efficiency. Remember what I said under Sustainable Development Goal number 7, we wanted to double the annual rate just to make it 2.4%. But this was back in 2014-15 when we were working on it. Now, i.e. international energy agencies and others say, no, it should be 4% per year improvement in energy efficiency. And you have to play your part on that, yeah? But of course, we have to deal with energy access in the South. And we in the South have responsibility. We have to create the right regulatory frameworks. So Professor Ignacio, myself, people from the Florence School of Regulation, we've launched just a month ago, the Africa School of Regulations. We're trying to learn from Europe. We'll talk about that later. We need more analytics. We need folks like you and research centers to do better analysis, better data, to deal with some of the social problems we're going to have when we push decarbonization. There will be dislocation of people and labor. For countries like South Africa, it is serious. They have some regions in South Africa or Poland where they depend mainly on coal. How do we deal with these issues without social safety nets? We need global cooperation. Last slide. Last slide, please. We need to mobilize political leadership. As they told you, now I decided to test what it is like making laws. So after being in the global system, being in academia, I decided to run for public office. And I tell you, I thought life was difficult being a diplomat or being an engineer or being an economist. Try politics. Politics is hell, it's tough. But I've learned it now 4 years. I have 1 more year to go in parliament. Ignacio has asked me, are you going to continue? I say, Ignacio, I don't know. The world is safer dealing with energy. But again, you have to have the politics right. If you don't have the right politicians, the right people in the legislatures to make the right laws to support innovation, to support and have the mandates about how much you have to increase the targets for energy efficiency and renewables. If the lawmakers don't do it, we're in trouble. If you don't have the right politicians who will look long-term, 10, 20 years, rather than short-term for their re-election, we will all be in trouble. Planning matters. We have to raise awareness of parliamentarians. Very few of us parliamentarians understand these issues, particularly in developing countries. And finally, talk is cheap, but you need finance. And yes, last week in Europe, there was a lot of discussion on finance. How do we do better financing? How do we do risk investments? How do we give more money to research so that we can solve these problems? I had to run fast. I hope it was clear, but the slides are available for you to see. And thank you for giving this opportunity. I hope that when COVID subsides, I'll join you one day so I can benefit from your own knowledge as others have helped me over time understand innovation and how engineers work. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Well, thank you, Kandeh, for this splendid conference. This time we cannot stand and applaud, but I hope that you will feel somehow our gratitude. Well, I have some questions, but I see that in the audience they have sent some questions that I'm going to address to you. The first one, coming from one of our colleagues, Julio Eisman, who is working in several projects in electrification in different parts of the world, has to do, I mean, the question comes from the European perspective, although I think that you will easily translate that into the African one. So he's asking, what's your opinion about the proposal of the European Commission to temporarily consider gas and nuclear as green energies? And I think that that translates into Africa in this debate about whether to use or not natural gas for production of electricity. I think I know what is your opinion about this, but I'd like to express that to the audience, please.
I would say the answer to that is we welcome it. We are happy the Europeans are open and honest about it, that gas has to be part of this transition. And for some countries like in Africa or in Asia, it is the reality. If you tell people no more coal, you cannot say no more gas. And you are investing in gas. If you take countries like Cyprus, I facilitated a discussion last year between Europe and Africa, and one of the ministers from Cyprus gave an idea of their energy transition plan. Gas was central to it. Yeah, you're building pipelines with your neighbors in Russia and elsewhere. Gas is part of it. Gas prices are going up in Europe. Look, that's our reality. But for the Africans, as I said, 30 to 40% of the new discoveries are in Africa. We need it. Remember, you're adding another 1 billion people by 2050. They need growth. They need to move. You need the gas solutions to have baseload and, in fact, integrate with renewables. Nuclear is a difficult one, but yes, it has zero emissions. However, storage issues, safety issues matter. But again, it's Europe being honest to say, look, we know we're going to need nuclear for the foreseeable future. South Africans are innovating, looking at modularized nuclear technologies. I know the Argentinians are trying to learn from them. Can it be done safer? Bill Gates is investing in some form. I think it's called Terra Energy or Energy Terra. He's investing heavily in what he calls energy miracles. And there's a nuclear solution to that. So I think Europe is being honest that this natural gas is going to be important. Gas to power we need. It's cleaner than coal. Yeah, possibly cleaner than oil. We use heavy fuel oil here. We need the gas for clean cooking. We need LPG to save lives. By the way, globally, 3 billion people have zero access to clean cooking solutions, what we call modern energy cooking services. 3 billion. We need to save those lives. LPG, natural gas, is part of that solution until they can get renewable electricity in their communities. So gas, yes, I welcome that. Over to you.
I have a second part of Julio Eisman's question, and this is your opinion, your assessment of the outcome of the recent Africa-Europe summit. Do you think that the outcome was satisfactory? What is your opinion about it, particularly from the viewpoint of your presentation today?
Yes, I am cautiously optimistic. I like the tone of the discussion. For example, the honest discussion of natural gas and gas solutions. I can tell you 6 months ago, we didn't have that. I co-chair the Energy Strategy Group for the Africa-Europe Foundation, together with Connie Hedegaard, the former Commissioner for Climate for the European Commission. Both of us chair that. 6, 7 months ago, we fought over gas. 2 years ago, I was chairing another working group for the European Commission, and Professor Ignacio was a member of that committee. He knows the fights we had. People did not want to talk about gas. So I like the tone. There's a reality here. It means we're listening to each other. Europe is listening to Africa. Europe is beginning to understand the ambitions that we cannot do small projects and make our conscience good that I'm doing a small 6 megawatt project in one corner of Africa. No, Europe understands the urgency now. Because yes, 2.5 billion neighbors without jobs, without prosperity and opportunity, without electricity, living in darkness is not tenable. So I am cautiously optimistic. Of course, we will see if the commitments will be fulfilled. We will see if the technology cooperation continues. We will see if the joint research continues. We will see if the financial flows will come. Then you ask me again in a year or two and I can give you an assessment. But for now, I'm cautiously optimistic.
Okay, I have here a question of Sofia Martinez that I am sure that you remember from the European Commission times. She's talking about that you mentioned before that countries like Angola, Mozambique, obviously Nigeria, are endowed with lots of resources, but how is that translating into improving energy access and reducing poverty in their countries?
Thank you, Sophia, for that question, and good to know you're on the call. Sophia, let me say to the public there, that's one Spanish lady that has helped Africa a lot. She even helped us establish this renewable energy center in Cape Verde maybe 10 years ago. And yes, at the EU Commission, she always tried to bring in this idea there that we're in this together and the energy access for the poor matter. Look, in the countries that you have mentioned, we have not had the transformation that these resources could have delivered. We've not had it, yeah, the way we wanted it. Yeah, so there's more to do about governance issues, transparency issues in using those resources, and also how do we help these countries use those resources, the wealth from those resources, to invest in green energy as well. It's not either or, it is both. But as they drive grid expansion, also invest in community-based decentralized energy. What is important today is the New Deal Europe announced in COP26 for South Africa. $8.5 billion to work with South Africa to transition from coal. That is the new model. It's not an aid model. It's a business model. It's a partnership model that is very comprehensive. They say, we know South Africa, you have to move away from coal. We know there will be dislocations in some communities because they depend on coal. We know that many of your industry, in fact, use liquefied coal for power generation in the mines and in industry. So we want to work with you all along the value chain, building capacities of your institutions and investing together. European companies, South African companies, and they know also that South Africa has led a lot on wind and solar through their auctions, reducing the cost of solar and wind. But also they know that South Africa can lead the green hydrogen revolution. They can move faster on hydrogen fuel cells. Already South African companies are investing in solar power to generate renewables, or wind power, sorry, to generate hydrogen. So what I can say to you, Sophia, it is that model of partnership you should do for Nigeria, for Angola, for Gabon, those who have these kinds of resources, to say, look, we want to work with you now in a very transparent way. It's not just about pumping it out and taking it up north or taking it to Asia. It is working with you so there is prosperity, knowledge is transferred, our companies and your companies make money, but in the longer term, we shift you and help you decarbonize. And yes, you have access to the renewable energy. I think that's the model for the rich African countries. But remember, Kenya can produce that green hydrogen with geothermal power and wind. Namibia can do the same, possibly with nuclear power, because yes, they're sitting on a significant portion of the world's uranium. Zimbabwe is sitting on a significant proportion of lithium in the world. So it is this win-win. And for Congo and Zambia to say, we work with you to build those battery systems that everybody needs to store power. And you need the storage systems if we're going to have this bigger global energy transition. So, Sophia, it's a win-win partnership that we're talking about. And research and engineering has to back those partnerships.
Okay, there is another question here from my colleague at the Academy, Cesar Dopazo, and that refers to the impact of liberalization of the financial markets in Africa. So the question specifically is, are commerce liberalization and free capital circulation, so the outflow of capital and tax benefits of international companies, is that helping African countries in their quest for sustainable development?
We need more transparency. We know there's huge capital flight out of Africa. Some estimate that the capital flight due to all kinds of illegal transfers, but some of them are transfer pricing by companies that look legitimate, that is causing capital flight from Africa much more than the total aid that is coming in. So trade relations need to be, the financial flows need to be more transparent. European companies that are in the mining sector should be brave enough to announce to the public that here's how much we paid your government for your minerals. As I said before, there has to be transparency in how we exploit these minerals as well. And also the inflows. How do we target some of the aid money that is coming to build resilient institutions in Africa, rather than just feel good kind of aid money that comes in? And also, I believe, as I said, institution-built research and development, supporting the academy. So we build knowledge systems in Africa. So my bigger answer is we need greater transparency in those financial flows. There's some illegal ones that are significant.
Well, Kandeh, my colleagues here are shooting from all directions. So I have here a question from a colleague of mine at the university, Andrés González, also working in electrification projects all over the world. And he's asking about the sovereign decisions that Africa should make regarding the critical resources like minerals that you were commenting. So he says, in between the global chessboard where China, Russia, and the USA compete for resources, some of them critical for the energy transition, what roadmap for Africa sovereign decision-making is feasible?
It's a very good question. And when I was at the UN, I used to say 10, 15 years ago, because I went to many of those summits, Europe, Africa, Turkey, Africa, India, Africa, China, Africa, you name it, Japan, Africa. And I used to say 15 years ago, I say, everybody wants a piece of the African real estate. And indeed, it's a chessboard. He's very correct. We Africans have to be smart. We have to be smart. We have to be clear what is in our long-term interest, not our short-term interests. We have to fight the corruption that allows our resources to be exploited in ways that will not benefit future generations. So my short answer to you is we have a big responsibility to look at all our friends who are visiting us, who need a piece of our real estate, to be honest with ourselves, less corrupt, and say, look, I want a deal that will benefit my people for the next 50 years. The Botswana, they've done that in Botswana very well. The South Africans are very clear about what they want. But it is us, the poorer countries, where people take advantage. They take advantage of our immediate needs. And why should Europe care? If you are not part of helping us have the knowledge systems and the capability of negotiating better, having better content in those deals, and bad deals are done, 20 years down the line, our next generation will come and visit you. So my point I'm making is, don't think that it is Africa's problem. We are your neighbors. We are your neighbors. If our demographic pressures are what I told you before, if our governance systems do the wrong things, that's why you should care about democracy in Africa. That's why you should care about good governance in Africa. That's why you should care about the kinds of deals we're making for minerals. Otherwise, yes, those problems 20, 30 years down the line will come to you because the civil wars will increase, instability will increase, and people will vote with their feet. They will vote with their feet in large numbers. We don't want to see that. In the middle of that, you have to play your part and solve climate change because the climate refugees will be even more than the economic refugees. So I guess what I'm saying to you is we have responsibility. You also have a responsibility in this new chess game that we see coming up, especially because you have seen the instability that is beginning to emerge, particularly in West Africa. 4 coup d'etats within a very short period. It's dangerous. We're all worried. We don't want the dominoes to fall. No, we want prosperity and we want green growth.
Kandeh, the questions are so good that I cannot stop asking them. I have 2 more, and that's it. The first one comes from Carlos Ayer, a good friend that has done many good things for sustainability all over the world from Iberdrola. He's talking about the high cost of capital in Africa for investments. So he says, according to the International Energy Agency, the cost of capital of economies in developing countries for investing in clean energy could be 7 times the one needed in advanced economies. Which do you think are the drivers to reduce the gap?
Yeah, good question. In my country, you go to the bank for any loan, they tell you 23%, 25%. So very few people will invest in agribusiness. Very few will in large-scale agribusiness. Very few will invest in renewable energy. The financial systems there are not even, most of them in sub-Saharan Africa countries, only a handful, are even investing in mini-grids. They don't even know how to structure those deals. So first of all, the capital base is very small for a number of those banks. Some of the regulations are too rigid for some of those countries. The risk perception, especially political risk perception, is high. So some put a premium on that as well. And of course, one key driver, which we're fighting even in our country, is the fiscal overhang. The governments are borrowing too much. Governments are spending money they don't have. So they launch all kinds of DRA bonds and instruments to suck off capital from the private banks. And so what happens then is that each time we see interest rates going because the government is crowding out the private sector. Solutions include, we manage our macroeconomy better. Solutions include some of what we discuss now in Europe, de-risking instruments, using public capital in Europe to back their companies when they want to invest down here, using aid money to help shore up our financial infrastructure here, so our local entrepreneurs can become energy entrepreneurs, even for off-grid solutions. So we finance clean cooking solution suppliers. So using, and I think Europe talks about blended finance. Finally, I would say what Europe should not do is to use the new taxonomy to block critical energy investments in Africa. That will be discrimination. Also, don't use greening as a way of discrimination against the poor. We need energy. My grandmother may not have even the first iota of electricity in the village. So yeah, we need to reform the financial systems, and we need to do it together.
Well, Kandeh, the last question comes from the Secretary of the Academy of Engineering, Eloy Alvarez. And maybe you don't have to answer the question now, because I think it's a question to think about. So he's asking how Africa and Spain and the Royal Academy of Engineering can collaborate in the topic of critical materials and the industrial value related.
Can begin to collaborate now, joint research on availability of these raw materials, where they are, research on the potential for African countries to, some of them, not all, a few, that can go into production of basic battery systems. We can look at those opportunities, economic opportunities that may exist, what kind of support is needed in the academies or research centers to do that. We can collaborate on what Ignacio and I are working on, the Africa School of Regulations. In all of what we say, regulations matter. The legal frameworks matter. Otherwise, big investments will not come in. Or collecting basic data on lack of clean cooking and advising your government that, look, they cut down the trees to cook. Their people are dying. Agricultural value chains depend on firewood and charcoal to process the food before they sell it in the markets. This is not good in 21st century. They need to store vaccines. They need decentralized energy. But that decentralized energy may produce electricity that can be used in electric pressure cookers, so they don't cut down the forest. We need a lot of research in that area. It's not happening yet. Because over the years, people have treated lack of access to clean cooking as a charity case, as a case of just women. No, the forests are disappearing very fast in Africa. I mean, we're looking at Congo right now. Even the forest reserves, people are beginning to cut down because they have to feed growing populations with firewood in Rwanda, in Ethiopia, in Sierra Leone, in Nigeria. You see it everywhere. So yes, we can begin to collaborate right away, but on the material science side, what materials are there? What quantities? My country does not know how much rare earth metals we have, but we know people are mining it illegally. They're removing zircon here. Yeah, it's going out. We don't know the quantities we have. That is part of the corruption of the world. We know cobalt is sitting in Congo. The way it is mined is like slavery of the 16th century or pre-industrial time. So this is wrong. So you in the academy, engineers and others can join this to say, look, we can do things better. We can have a win-win world where prosperity is shared, where yes, our children come to Spain, Madrid, Barcelona to watch the game and come back home because there's prosperity there, not as illegal aliens. Over to you. Thank you very much for this opportunity.
Well, Kandeh, thank you very much. Excellent conference. I have enjoyed immensely the presentation and particularly the answers to the questions coming from all directions. So just to say that we really do wish that you continue mobilizing people, and I hope that that will reach to the community of engineers to contribute to development. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the opportunity. Bye-bye.
Do you want to say something?
Todo. Sigo. Gracias. Dr. Yumkella, are you on? Mm-hmm. Should I close this or may I speak? I don't know. Is Dr. Yumkella connected? Is connected? I don't know.
Yes, I am.
Ya. Bueno. El doctor Yumkella nos ha suministrado tal cantidad, no solamente de datos, sino también de ideas, que vamos a necesitar tiempo para asumirlas, elaborarlas y colaborar. ¿Estamos dispuestos a colaborar? Creo que Europa tiene que colaborar. África va a tener los recursos naturales, pero también va a tener la población. Con lo cual es un deber y una necesidad de Europa colaborar. Y la Real Academia de Ingeniería también está dispuesta a colaborar en todo lo que se pueda. Now I'm going to switch to English. Dr. Yumkella, we are very grateful to have you with us. And you have provided us such an amount of data and ideas that we need time to assume and to elaborate this. But I can tell you that we, the Europeans, we need you. You are going to have all the resources. You are going to have the population. And we don't have resources in Europe. We don't have population. then we better collaborate with you. And I think that collaborating together, Africans and Europeans, will be able to fulfill the 17 Sustainable Development Goals. And thank you very much. And I hope that you, through our common friend, Ignacio, if you need our help, our collaboration, our cooperation, we Europeans, but mostly the academicians of the Spanish Royal Academy of Engineering, we are very willing to collaborate with you. And we need not only finance. Even more important than financing is the willingness of collaborate. And I think that we have the willingness to collaborate with you. Thank you very much. No sé si está. Sigue.
Bien.
No
lo sé.
No
sé. Sí, lo que pasa es que esto va con retraso.
Then, I think with this we can cerrar, to close the meeting, ¿no? Muchas gracias. Gracias a todos por haber asistido y por las preguntas, porque la conferencia ha sido muy interesante, pero también las preguntas, como que todas tenían intención, ¿no? Muchas gracias a todos.